On a clear autumn morning in Sichuan, China, the air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves, and the sky stretched in a calm blue over the famous Leshan giant Buddha, a 71-meter-tall stone statue carved into a cliffside, overlooking the confluence of 3 rivers. Tourists flocked to the heritage site, cameras in hand, marveling at the serenity etched into the statue's ancient features. What none of them knew was that beneath this still face lay a secret buried for over a millennium, one that would shake the spiritual and political foundations of nations. Dr. Li Jun, a seasoned Chinese archaeologist, was leading a routine conservation study along with his research team from the National Cultural Heritage Administration. The team was tasked with conducting non-invasive structural analysis of the statue using 3D mapping and ground-penetrating radar. It was supposed to be standard procedure. But fate had a different plan. As they scanned the torso area of the statue, an area that had always been assumed to be solid rock, the instruments began to behave strangely. Echoes returned inconsistently. Hollow chambers? Unlikely. The Buddha statue was carved into solid stone, and no ancient documentation had ever mentioned any internal construction. Dr. Li ordered a focus scan. What they found stunned everyone. A large cavity, almost 5 meters in diameter, was discovered deep inside the belly of the statue. It wasn't a simple hollow space. The cavity had what appeared to be distinct layers, stone platforms, sediment layers, and possible human interference. Immediately, work was halted, and officials were informed. Within hours, the area was sealed off from the public, and military guards were discreetly stationed nearby. The Chinese government responded quickly. While initially downplaying the incident to the media, internally, a high-level task force was formed under the direct oversight of President Xi Jinping himself. The president, who was known for his strict stance on ideological control and religious neutrality, saw the discovery as both a potential treasure and a potential threat. Dr. Li's team was granted clearance to proceed with an internal expedition into the Buddha statue. As the outer layer was carefully drilled open and stabilized, they entered the hollow. What awaited them inside was beyond imagination. The chamber was surprisingly well preserved. The air was dry, likely sealed for centuries. Dust floated like ancient spirits in the narrow beams of flashlight. Stone carvings lined the walls, unlike anything in Buddhist tradition. Strange, curving symbols, geometric shapes, and in the center, an altar-like structure. Lying on top of it was a wooden chest, nearly fossilized. With trembling hands, Dr. Li opened the chest. Inside were brittle parchment scrolls, bronze artifacts, and something utterly shocking, a string of prayer beads. They were unmistakable. Misbah, the Islamic rosary. Intricately carved, and on the largest bead, the word Subhanallah was etched in classical Arabic. Gasps echoed in the chamber. Arabic? Whispered one of the assistants. How is this possible? It didn't stop there. On the walls of the chamber, faint inscriptions began to emerge as they shone ultraviolet lights. Arabic calligraphy. Verses, some incomplete, some intact. Among them, a name, Muhammad, written with reverence. Another name stood out. Zulkifli. Dr. Li stared in disbelief. Prophet Zulkifli? That name, revered in Islamic scripture, was not known in Buddhism. What was it doing inside one of China's most sacred Buddhist monuments? When the news reached Beijing, President Xi was briefed in a closed meeting. The implications were enormous. If this information leaked, it could provoke theological shockwaves across the country, and possibly the world. Was the statue always Buddhist? Could it have been reappropriated from another religious culture? How did Islamic artifacts end up sealed within it? President Xi's first reaction was to contain the story. No leaks. Absolute discretion. We cannot allow confusion among the people, he said. But curiosity had already begun to stir in the archaeological world. Whispers of a historical anomaly at the Leshan Buddha reached academic circles abroad. The government knew they couldn't hide it forever. Xi Jinping made a bold move. He ordered the formation of a multinational research committee under the guise of cultural exchange and interfaith heritage exploration. This way, China could maintain control while appearing open-minded on the world stage. Dr. Li and his team were now joined by experts from Iran, Turkey, Malaysia, Egypt, and even France and Japan. Linguists, theologians, archaeologists, and historians all converged in Leshan to study the artifacts. The room inside the statue was now being called the Hidden Chamber of Unity. The initial consensus among experts was that the artifacts were authentic and ancient, likely over 1,000 years old. Radiocarbon dating of the parchment pointed to a period between the 8th and 10th centuries CE. The misbah, made of sandalwood and polished with age, was unlike any Chinese artifact ever discovered. The Arabic inscriptions raised eyebrows across disciplines. Some were clearly religious phrases: Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Bismillah. One sentence referenced the servant of Allah, Zulkifli. Another fragment hinted at the messenger Muhammad, peace be upon him. This couldn't be a coincidence. Muslim scholars began proposing a controversial but fascinating theory, that the figure long believed to be the Buddha represented in this statue might actually have connections to Prophet Zulkifli, known in Abrahamic traditions as a pious and patient man, sent to guide his people. Some even speculated that Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha, and Zulkifli may have been conflated over centuries through oral tradition, trade route exchanges, and cultural evolution. The academic community was split. Some dismissed the theory as revisionist fantasy. Others found it worthy of serious inquiry, especially in light of the artifact's authenticity. The debate intensified as media outlets got wind of the story and began publishing speculative headlines. Arabic found in ancient Buddha statue. Could Buddha have been a prophet? Islamic symbols in heart of Buddhist icon, what does it mean? President Xi could no longer remain silent. He addressed the nation in a special broadcast. China has always respected its rich historical heritage. The Leshan Buddha remains a symbol of cultural unity. This new discovery invites us not to fear, but to explore. We must approach it not with division, but with dialogue. His speech was met with mixed reactions. Conservative Buddhists in China expressed deep concern. Muslims around the world celebrated it as a miraculous sign. International leaders began calling for transparency. And so, what began as a quiet morning of routine inspection had evolved into a global reckoning. What was once carved in stone as a symbol of Buddhist serenity now whispered ancient truths in Arabic, echoing questions about identity, history, and belief across the world. In the days that followed the shocking discovery within the Leshan giant Buddha, the site became one of the most closely guarded places in all of China. The area was quietly closed off to tourists under the guise of conservation work. But aerial surveillance photos leaked online showed armed military presence, and cranes being moved into place. Satellite imagery sparked speculation, and online forums exploded with wild theories, everything from secret tunnels to UFOs. But the truth was even more fascinating, and far more consequential. Inside the statue's newly discovered chamber, the International Committee worked tirelessly under Dr. Li's supervision. Armed with high-resolution scanners and translation software, the team began meticulously decoding the Arabic inscriptions carved into the chamber's walls. One inscription sent chills through the room. Wa Zulkifli kana mina sabirin, and Zulkifli was among the patient. It was a direct quotation from the Qur'an. A Malaysian scholar named Dr. Hafiz Idris, holding back emotion, whispered, "This is not just archaeological. This is Quranic." His voice trembled as he pointed at the verse reference carved in Kufic script. No one could explain how such a verse came to exist inside a Buddhist icon built centuries before Islam officially reached China, or so they thought. The committee made a list of all the anomalies. Misbah, Islamic prayer beads, with Subhanallah engraved. Arabic calligraphy citing Zulkifli and Prophet Muhammad, pduh. Ancient manuscripts containing both philosophical meditations and religious supplications in mixed languages. A crude but clear carving of a man in a robe with his palms raised in dua, a Muslim gesture of prayer. The most astounding discovery came when they analyzed the statue's head. Using thermal imaging, the scientists found embedded inscriptions beneath layers of oxidized stone. When cleaned and digitally enhanced, one sentence glowed like fire. La ilaha illallah. There is no deity but Allah. The room fell into stunned silence. Even Dr. Lee, a man of science, had to pause. This is no ordinary monument, he murmured. This is a message buried in time. Outside, however, the situation was getting more complicated. News of the discovery had begun leaking into the international press. A documentary filmmaker from Al Jazeera somehow obtained a short drone clip of the statue's internal layout. Headlines began to appear across the world. Islamic relics found inside China's sacred Buddha. Prophet Zulkifli linked to Leshan Monument, scholars divided. Xi Jinping orders global interfaith dialogue amidst religious shockwaves. In China, the reaction was deeply divided. Young Muslims felt empowered. Many took to Weibo, China's version of Twitter, using coded language to discuss the light inside the stone. But Buddhist communities were shaken. Monks from Mount Ummah, a nearby sacred Buddhist site, held emergency gatherings. One senior monk publicly stated, "Buddha's image cannot be altered by historical errors or confusion. This is dangerous." President Xi Jinping found himself navigating a crisis that touched not only on faith, but on the identity of an entire civilization. In a closed-door session with China's Central Committee, he expressed both concern and intrigue. "If this finding is true," he said, "it will not destroy us. It will define us." To balance internal pressure and global curiosity, Xi Jinping proposed an unprecedented move, a live broadcasted interfaith symposium. Scholars from all major religions would discuss the discovery, live from Beijing. The theme? Truth, tolerance, and time. The announcement was met with overwhelming international interest. Muslim-majority nations sent delegations. The Vatican expressed cautious curiosity. Buddhist leaders from Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Japan agreed to join. A respected sheikh from Morocco called the discovery a whisper from history that Allah is one. While preparations were being made, something else was quietly happening. In Leshan, despite security protocols, a handful of images leaked from inside the statue. One photo showed the Arabic word Zulkifli, glowing under UV light. Another captured the misbah placed on the altar. These images went viral across the Muslim world. In Jakarta, Cairo, Istanbul, and Lahore, people held vigils. Some wept. Others raised their hands in prayer. "Ya Allah, show us the truth," they chanted. In Indonesia, a group of Muslim youth started a hashtag that trended worldwide, #TruthInLeshan. The committee, meanwhile, began piecing together the possibility that the statue was never originally built as a Buddhist figure. A Turkish historian suggested that it might have been repurposed during the Tang dynasty, when many cultures intersected in China due to the Silk Road. Trade routes brought Persian Muslims, Indian sages, and Arab travelers through Chinese lands. Could it be that the statue was once a monument to Zulkifli, a prophet acknowledged by Islam and Judaism alike? A new theory emerged, that the Leshan monument was originally constructed by a multi-faith community that revered a common moral teacher. The similarities between the teachings of Buddha and those of Zulkifli were being scrutinized. Both taught patience, justice, detachment from worldly pleasures, and divine surrender. Could their stories have merged over time, or had they always been one and the same? As more evidence was revealed, Chinese Muslims began to feel a spiritual revival. In Urumqi, in Xinjiang province, a young Muslim teacher named Amina told her students, "What was hidden in stone is now clear in our hearts." She encouraged them to study not just Islam, but also the history of China through an Islamic lens. The mood in the Muslim world turned from curiosity to awe. Friday sermons across cities from Casablanca to Kuala Lumpur mentioned the Leshan discovery. Scholars began writing papers connecting Prophet Zulkifli's trials to Buddhist parables about renunciation and divine justice. But not everyone was pleased. Conservative voices in China's atheist circles began calling the discovery a foreign infection. Social media bots flooded the internet with conspiracy theories, calling the artifacts planted or fabricated. A few extremist monks accused the Muslim world of trying to Erase Buddha. President Xi Jinping remained firm. Let history speak, he declared on national television. China is not afraid of truth. Truth is the bridge between civilizations. The world waited with bated breath for the upcoming Interfaith Symposium in Beijing. Meanwhile, deep inside the belly of the Leshan Buddha, the light from the inscriptions continued to glow, faint but undeniable. As the International Committee finalized its first report, Dr. Li closed the final page and looked up. We came here to study stone, he said. But we may have uncovered the soul of a forgotten prophet. The world had changed. And this was only the beginning. The anticipation surrounding the International Interfaith Symposium in Beijing reached fever pitch. World media outlets scrambled to secure live coverage. Never before had China hosted an event where Islamic scholars, Buddhist monks, Christian priests, Jewish rabbis, and even secular historians shared one stage, united by the mystery sealed inside a 1,000-year-old Buddha statue. The grand hall chosen for the symposium was the People's Great Assembly in Beijing. Banners bearing the phrase, "Truth, Tolerance, and Time," fluttered across the entrance, adorned with gold and deep red motifs, a blend of imperial elegance and modern diplomacy. Security was tight. Yet, the atmosphere buzzed with intellectual curiosity and spiritual anticipation. President Xi Jinping, dressed in a dark suit, opened the event with a speech that was both cautious and visionary. We stand today, he said, not at the crossroads of conflict, but at the gates of understanding. Let no discovery divide us. Let it unite us in the pursuit of knowledge and peace. The first speaker was Dr. Hafiz Idris from Malaysia. Standing confidently, he recounted the Quranic descriptions of Prophet Zulkifli, his patience, his silence amidst trials, and his spiritual devotion. This is not about converting beliefs, Dr. Idris emphasized. It is about reclaiming shared truths buried beneath the politics of time. Then came Venerable Tenzin Rinpoche, a Buddhist monk from Tibet. He spoke calmly but firmly. I acknowledge the inscriptions. I see their presence. But to me, the Buddha is not a name. He is a path. Perhaps Zulkifli was also on this path. If the teachings are similar, maybe the goal is not so far apart. The crowd murmured with appreciation. Then came a surprise. Dr. Antoine Bellamy, a French agnostic historian known for his sharp critiques of religious mythology, took the stage. What I find here is not mythology, he said. I find archaeological alignment. Script, carbon dating, cultural overlap, all suggest a religious coexistence in early Chinese civilization. If this statue once belonged to another spiritual memory, the question is, why was it erased? The audience fell silent. Outside the symposium, however, ideological battles raged. Social media was a war zone. Chinese internet forums saw an explosion of nationalist sentiment. Do not rewrite our heritage, some wrote. Others responded, the truth cannot be silenced. Muslim netizens from Pakistan, Indonesia, and the Arab world posted side-by-side comparisons of Quranic verses and Buddhist parables, emphasizing their overlap in ethics and spirituality. In the streets of Leshan, people began gathering. Not in protest, but in silent awe. Candlelit vigils were held by local Muslims. Some Buddhist monks stood beside them, acknowledging the weight of the moment, even if they didn't agree on its interpretation. But behind the scenes, Chinese government officials grew nervous. The Ministry of Culture received warnings from party hardliners. If this continues, Buddhism may be seen as subordinate to Islam. They warned, we cannot allow social upheaval. President Xi was at a crossroads. For weeks, he had allowed academic freedom to thrive, encouraged exploration, and even championed dialogue. But now, his own circle was pressuring him to limit the growing narrative. He summoned Dr. Li Jun to the capital. The archaeologist, still weathered from weeks inside the statue's chamber, sat before the most powerful man in China. She placed a file on the table. It was the final research draft. Is it all true? She asked quietly. Dr. Li nodded. Every word. We verified it with scholars from 7 countries. She leaned back. Do you understand what this could mean? Dr. Lee hesitated. Yes. And I also understand what it could heal. She studied him for a long moment. Then he made his decision. We won't censor the findings, he said. But we will frame them as part of a shared human journey, not a religious claim. Dr. Lee nodded. It was a compromise, but a significant one. Meanwhile, more evidence continued to pour in. Laser scanning revealed that the giant Buddha's earlobes had once contained smaller carvings, since eroded, but they resembled ancient Semitic script. A closer study of the statue's base revealed stone tiles engraved with names, some unmistakably Arabic. Yusuf, Ibrahim, Zulkifli. Some tiles had been chiseled off in ancient times. A researcher from Iran theorized that during early dynasties, religious symbols might have been covered or overwritten during a wave of Buddhist consolidation. A young Muslim woman from Morocco, Dr. Amal Sufi, submitted her report. What we are seeing is not an Islamic takeover of Buddhism. We are witnessing the fossilized memory of religious collaboration. She received a standing ovation during her speech at the symposium. Back in Leshan, the locals began to profit from the increased interest. Hotels filled with tourists. Vendors began selling Arabic-inscribed souvenirs. Even non-Muslim visitors asked about the prophet in the statue. Some saw a business opportunity. Others felt they were walking on sacred ground. Meanwhile, Chinese Muslims, often a marginalized community, saw this as their moment. In mosques across China, imams gave khutbahs, sermons about Zulkifli's patience, linking it to the Muslim community's struggles and hopes. In Xinjiang, despite tensions, underground gatherings discussed the discovery. One Uyghur youth wrote anonymously online, "The Buddha held our names inside him. Now we are no longer invisible." However, warnings loomed. A firebrand Buddhist group from Sri Lanka issued a statement rejecting the discovery as a heretical rewriting of sacred history. Some monks burned effigies of the statue, claiming it had been desecrated. The International Committee, in response, urged patience and understanding. Dr. Hafiz Idris, in his final remarks at the Beijing conference, addressed the world directly. To our Buddhist brothers and sisters, he said, we do not seek to replace your wisdom. We seek only to understand our own roots better. And to the world, he continued, let this statue teach us that buried beneath centuries of stone is always a shared truth, waiting for us to uncover it, if we dare. As he stepped down from the podium, the audience erupted in applause, except for a few stiff faces from state officials. Later that night, in a quiet private moment, President Xi walked the halls of the National Museum. He paused before an exhibit of ancient trade maps. Silk Road routes sprawled across glass panels, linking Mecca to Xi'an, Baghdad to Leshan. He murmured, perhaps, they came earlier than we thought. The wind outside howled through the old trees of Beijing. Somewhere, a call to prayer echoed faintly from a hidden corner of the city. History was speaking. The world had begun to listen. While the symposium in Beijing had come to a close, its ripples had only begun to spread. Across continents, religious scholars, historians, and common people were now grappling with the implications of the Leshan discovery. News anchors discussed it nightly. University students debated its meaning in classrooms. And in households across the Muslim world, parents told their children. Even a giant stone bore witness to the truth of Islam. In Istanbul, a special program aired on TRT World titled Buddha, Zulkifli, and the Lost Pages of History. Viewers watched clips from the symposium, saw the Arabic carvings inside the statue, and heard Chinese scholars confirm what had once seemed impossible. A Turkish historian, Dr. Ayleen Demir, concluded the segment with a bold claim. This may be the strongest archaeological indication that Islamic teachings spread deeper into East Asia than we ever documented. At Al-Azhar University in Cairo, students requested new electives on Islam and the Silk Road. In Indonesia, Islamic boarding schools held special sessions on Prophet Zulkifli, connecting his character with the Buddhist values of patience, balance, and spiritual solitude. For the first time, many Muslims around the world felt a strange connection, not conflict, with Buddhism. But within China, the government began to feel a quiet pressure mounting beneath the surface. In Leshan, where the discovery had first taken place, massive crowds began arriving daily. Pilgrims, tourists, and curious minds stood shoulder to shoulder. Many Muslims performed voluntary salah prayer near the river bank across from the statue. Some recited Surah Al-Anbiya, where Zulkifli is mentioned, with tears in their eyes. "We never imagined we'd pray here," whispered one Indonesian pilgrim. "But when I bowed, it felt like history itself bowed with me." Meanwhile, Xi Jinping received an updated intelligence report. According to internal analysis, interest in Islam had increased 700% on Chinese search engines. Arabic learning apps had spiked in downloads. Underground masjids reported a quiet increase in attendance, especially by Han Chinese youth. The Communist Party feared that the narrative of national unity could be hijacked by ideological resurgence. Conservative officials advised clamping down. Yet, she was caught between two forces, control and curiosity. In a private discussion with his cultural advisors, she said, "We cannot fear knowledge, but we must manage it wisely." To preserve stability, he issued a controlled media strategy. All official coverage would refer to Zulkifli as a Middle Eastern sage, rather than Islamic prophet. Any mass religious gathering near Leshan would be quietly dispersed. For safety. However, academic research on the statue would remain open and even encouraged, to prevent accusations of censorship. At the same time, something unexpected was taking shape. Interfaith initiatives sparked across Asia. In Singapore, Buddhist and Muslim leaders held a joint conference titled "Silent Prophets Shared Light." In Malaysia, young Buddhists visited mosques during Friday prayers in a gesture of peace. The idea that two major world religions might have intersected not only philosophically but historically was beginning to open hearts. Still, there were challenges. In Myanmar, nationalist monks condemned the discovery, calling it Islamic revisionism. Violent protests broke out in parts of Sri Lanka. Even in India, where communal tensions run deep, far-right groups claimed the discovery was fake propaganda from Islamic countries. Meanwhile, in the West, the narrative was carefully observed. In Washington, D.C., a special session at the Smithsonian brought together American archaeologists, religious historians, and political analysts. Their conclusion was measured: the discovery was real, the inscriptions authentic, but the meaning, they insisted, remains subject to cultural interpretation. But one voice stood out. A Jewish scholar, Dr. Rachel Levine, took the microphone and said, "As a student of the Abrahamic prophets, I recognize the name Zulkifli as Ezekiel in Hebrew tradition. If this monument connects to him, then perhaps this statue is a symbol of universal prophecy, not of one religion, but of divine continuity." Her words were met with stunned applause. Back in China, something was quietly brewing among the youth. Videos on Douyin, Chinese TikTok, began circulating, clips of young Han boys reciting the Shahida in secret, young girls wearing subtle headscarves in solidarity with Muslim classmates, and students sketching Arabic calligraphy on their notebooks. Many of these videos were deleted within hours, but the seed had been planted. In an elite university in Beijing, a student named Zhang Wei uploaded a short but powerful poem. The statue hid the name in silence, but the stone remembered the light. 1,000 years it watched and waited, until the world was ready to recite. The poem went viral. Outside the spotlight, underground Muslim communities across China, particularly among the Hui and Uyghur populations, felt emboldened. For decades, they had worshipped in secrecy or under pressure. Now, they whispered, Allah gave us a sign. In one underground masjid in Gansu province, an elderly imam wept as he recited Surah Sad aloud, tears streaming as he reached the verse. And remember Ismail, Elisha, and Zulkifli, all were among the best. Quran 38:48. Young men around him bowed in sujud, not just in worship, but in awe. The Leshan discovery had become a spiritual awakening. Even outside the Muslim world, an unexpected shift was taking place. Buddhist scholars began studying Islamic texts. A monk from Kyoto named Kenji Takamura began translating Quranic verses into poetic Japanese form. He told a BBC reporter, "If Zulkifli and Buddha share a soul, I want to hear both sides of his wisdom." By now, the original team of archaeologists, Dr. Li Jun and his colleagues, had become international celebrities. Documentaries were being made. Interviews aired daily. Dr. Li, however, avoided public politics. In one rare interview he said only, "The stones spoke. We listened. The meaning belongs to everyone." But that was not the end. In a locked vault under Beijing's National Research Institute, newly decoded scrolls from the chamber revealed something even more astonishing: a map. Hand-drawn, faded yet unmistakable, a trade route spanning from Arabia through Persia, into Kashgar, and ending in the Sichuan region. Beside it, a note in Arabic. "We brought his name to the east, so it would rise with the sun." Dr. Amal Sufi, upon translating it, burst into tears. She looked at President Xi's appointed advisor and said, "It was deliberate. They didn't stumble here. They came to plant his name." The revelation stunned the remaining skeptics. It was no longer just about artifacts, it was about intention. The presence of Islam in ancient China wasn't a possibility. It was a reality. And now, the world had to decide what to do with it. The discovery of the faded map within the chamber of the Leshan Buddha transformed the entire investigation from speculative archaeology into undeniable historical truth. With its jagged lines and carefully inked cities, the map traced an ancient route from the Arabian Peninsula, through the heart of Persia, passing through Samarkand, Kashgar, and finally ending in Sichuan, China, right where the Leshan statue stood. But it was the final note, delicately written in Arabic, that carried the weight of centuries. "We brought his name to the east, so it would rise with the sun." It was no longer conjecture. This wasn't just a monument with Islamic symbols. This was a destination. A mission. The chamber within the statue had not just preserved relics, it had preserved intention. This was Dawah, spiritual outreach, etched into the mountains of China 1,000 years before modern historians thought possible. President Xi Jinping held the scroll in his hands during a private viewing at the Central Archives. He didn't speak for several minutes. The room, filled with advisors and senior historians, remained silent. Finally, he placed it gently on the velvet-covered table and said, "If this map is real, then we have never fully understood our past." The scroll was immediately sent for international verification. A team of experts from Oxford, Cairo, and Istanbul confirmed that the ink composition and calligraphy style matched early 9th century Islamic manuscripts. The map was genuine. And now, the geopolitical implications were too vast to ignore. The Chinese government faced a dilemma: suppress the map and lose credibility, or embrace it and risk ideological instability. Ultimately, Xi Jinping made a bold decision. He approved a cultural project titled the Eastern Light Initiative, officially recognizing the map as part of China's shared civilizations archive. In his televised address, Xi said, "Our land has always been one of meeting points. Silk, spices, teachings, they all came. The map found inside the Leshan monument proves that China was not isolated from the message of peace brought by distant messengers. Let us respect the journey, not fear it." Muslim countries hailed this as historic. Turkish President Erdogan called it a turning point in East-West religious understanding. Scholars from Al-Azhar sent a delegation to personally thank the Chinese government. And in Mecca, during Friday prayer, the Grand Mufti mentioned the Leshan discovery as a sign of Allah's wisdom, that no message is ever truly lost. But while Muslim-majority nations embraced the news, others remained cautious. In Japan, a group of Buddhist historians argued that Zulkifli might have been a wandering spiritual teacher whose teachings eventually merged with Siddhartha Gautama's. In Sri Lanka and Myanmar, nationalist Buddhist movements dismissed the discovery entirely, accusing China of politicizing faith. Yet what the critics couldn't stop was the growing spiritual awakening. Thousands of people, Muslims and non-Muslims, began making pilgrimages to Leshan. The local airport saw a 400% increase in international flights. Hotels were fully booked for months. The government had to establish crowd control units and guided tours. And deep within the belly of the statue, the Chamber of Unity, as it was now called, became a symbol of humanity's forgotten harmony. It was no longer just about Islam or Buddhism. It was about what connected them both. Journalists from all over the world descended upon the site. One American correspondent wrote, "In a time when the world is polarized by religion and culture, this statue, with its ancient Arabic inscriptions and Islamic relics hidden within Buddhist serenity, reminds us that perhaps we were never truly divided, we were just unaware." Meanwhile, the academic community launched new cross-disciplinary programs. Harvard, Oxford, and the University of Malaya began offering courses titled Prophetic Paths in the East. Documentaries began appearing on Netflix and Amazon Prime. Even Hollywood producers began inquiring about film rights. But away from the headlines, something more profound was happening. In rural parts of China, young Muslims began holding storytelling circles. Elders shared tales passed down for generations about a man of silence who came from the West, who spoke little but helped the poor, fasted through hardship, and walked barefoot into China's inner valleys. For years, these were dismissed as folklore. Now, they were seen as oral testimonies. In one small village in Gansu province, an 83-year-old Hui Muslim named Ma Yun stood outside a simple masjid and said to a foreign journalist, "When I was a boy, my grandfather told me that we had a visitor long ago, a holy man. He said his name was Zulkifil. We never had proof. Until now." His eyes filled with tears. But not all reactions were of peace and wonder. Extremist groups from various religious and political ideologies began using the discovery for their own agendas. Conspiracy theories spread online, accusing China of fabricating the evidence to gain favor in the Muslim world. Others claimed the relics were planted. A few ultranationalist groups in China accused the government of betraying ancestral heritage. To combat misinformation, the Chinese government invited global religious leaders to inspect the chamber themselves. Imams from Medina, monks from Thailand, and professors from Jerusalem walked together through the dark stone corridor inside the statue, reading the same inscriptions, examining the same beads, and witnessing the map with their own eyes. The moment was immortalized in a now iconic photograph: a Chinese Muslim cleric, a Thai monk, and a Jewish rabbi standing shoulder to shoulder beneath the carved word Zulkifli, glowing in ultraviolet light. Social media lit up. This is what the world should look like. One chamber. One truth. Many hearts. Back in Beijing, a more delicate discussion was unfolding. The Chinese government had received a classified intelligence brief warning that certain radical elements, both atheist and extremist religious groups, were planning to disrupt the Leshan site. President Xi, known for his hardline approach to domestic security, issued a simple but stern command. Let no one disturb the message inside the mountain. Guard it, not because it belongs to China, but because it belongs to all humanity. And so, the Leshan Buddha was now more than a monument. It was a symbol. A bridge. A silent witness to a forgotten past. A vessel carrying the names of prophets across time, across rivers, and across belief systems. The sun rose again over the rivers that morning, its golden light catching on the statue's face. And perhaps, just perhaps, for the first time in 1,000 years, the Buddha smiled, not as a religious icon, but as a keeper of memory. And in mosques around the world, the name of Zulkifli echoed once more. In the shadow of the Leshan giant Buddha, the world was slowly redefining its relationship with the past. Once seen only as a Buddhist marvel carved into stone, the statue had now become a living conversation, an eternal question whispered by the mountain. Who walked here before we named him Buddha? The world's eyes were still fixed on Sichuan. For weeks, the crowd outside the site had grown larger, not rowdy, but reverent. Men and women from every faith stood together. Some wore hijabs, others saffron robes, others suits or jeans. They came not to convert, but to understand. Journalists called it the New Jerusalem. Historians called it the soft revolution of the spirit. Inside the tightly protected chamber, scientists continued their analysis. The chamber was now regulated by controlled humidity, and infrared scanning equipment lined the walls. Chinese archaeologist Dr. Li Jun stood with Turkish scholar Dr. Sabiha Aslan, peering at a set of faint lines under new spectral light. "Look at this," Sabiha whispered. "It's a line from Surah Sad. Same calligraphic hand as the others." Dr. Li tilted his head. "The Prophet Zulkifli, among the righteous." Again. Again and again. Sabiha nodded. "It's not an accident. This was devotion." The writing confirmed what the map had hinted at. This chamber had not been hidden by nature or time, it had been intentionally sealed. Preserved. The theory now accepted among most of the International Committee was as follows. Around 1,200 years ago, traveling Muslim sages, possibly linked to the Abbasid Caliphate, had made their way along the Silk Road, spreading the message of Islam. Somewhere along the journey, a group settled in China and began building a monument to honor one of the lesser-known yet spiritually profound prophets, Zulkifli. Whether they constructed the entire statue or carved the chamber into an existing structure remained uncertain. But the evidence was overwhelming. They had left their message, their worship, and their reverence behind, hoping it would one day be found. And it had been. But while reverence filled the mountain, tension filled the cities. In Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, underground chatter increased. Students whispered about converting. Young intellectuals formed reading clubs to discuss the Qur'an, studying it side by side with the Tao Te Ching and Buddhist sutras. Many were fascinated not just by theology, but by what they called spiritual symmetry. One quote from a Chinese university student went viral. "When the East prays with the hands open, and the West does the same, maybe the sky is not so different." Despite its controlled media policies, the Chinese government found itself facing a cultural phenomenon it could not contain. And so, it adjusted. The Ministry of Education issued guidelines allowing the mention of Islamic historical influence in public universities, while still labeling it cross-cultural heritage. Meanwhile, back in Leshan, something remarkable occurred. A young Chinese Muslim girl named Aisha, born into a quiet Hui family, stood at the gates of the statue. She had memorized the Quran by the age of 10 and dreamed of visiting the site ever since the news broke. Her father, a former truck driver, had saved for months to bring her. She stood quietly, clutching a small notebook where she had drawn images of Zulkifli based on what she imagined, a humble man with a staff, praying in the rain. When she finally entered the guided path around the statue's outer rim, she saw the massive stone eyes above her, calm, peaceful, eternal. "Baba," she whispered, "do you think the Prophet saw this view too?" Her father placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "If not with his eyes, then with his spirit." Later that night, a photo of Aisha praying outside the statue was uploaded online. Her small hands raised in dua, the silhouette of the giant Buddha glowing behind her in the twilight. The image was shared millions of times. Commentators around the world called it the picture of the century. Meanwhile, political ripples began to extend beyond China. In Saudi Arabia, the discovery sparked renewed interest in early Islamic outreach to the Far East. Riyadh announced a new research grant dedicated to tracing the travels of the Prophet Zulkifli. Iranian and Turkish scholars offered to fund restoration projects in Leshan to preserve the chamber. However, not everyone was pleased. In Sri Lanka and Myanmar, extremist Buddhist groups accused China of selling its soul. They claimed the entire discovery was an orchestrated political campaign to strengthen China's ties with Muslim nations. In response, China invited independent investigators from the United Nations to inspect the site. They came. They confirmed. And they left, stating simply, "This is not politics. This is history." Back in Cairo, Al-Azhar University issued a fatwa confirming the compatibility of Buddhist teachings of detachment and patience with Islamic spiritual values, especially those exemplified by Zulkifli. It was a small gesture, but one that signaled a new chapter of religious reconciliation. Even the Vatican, though cautious, sent a delegation to Leshan. One priest, after seeing the inscriptions firsthand, simply said, Perhaps the stone speaks the same truth we all seek, in different tongues. The world was beginning to breathe again. In mosques across China, imams began incorporating stories of Zulkifli into Friday sermons. They reminded congregants that patience was his path, that justice was his duty, and that silence could be stronger than speech. And in Buddhist temples, some monks lit incense in silent acknowledgement, not of theological agreement, but of shared awe. Then came the moment no one expected. In the final stages of their excavation, archaeologists found what appeared to be a sealed compartment beneath the central altar. Using non-invasive drilling, they opened it, and found a scroll, perfectly preserved. The writing inside was breathtaking. In Arabic calligraphy with Chinese annotations it read, "We testify that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. We built this not to conquer, but to remember. For Zulkifli walked in patience here, and we honor him with stone and silence. If you find this, know that we came in peace." It was signed only with a symbol, 2 palms raised in prayer. The world stopped. In Mecca, the Grand Imam wept on live television. In Turkey, the call to prayer was broadcast with a special message of unity. In China, even the secular elite could not dismiss the clarity of the words. Xi Jinping read the scroll himself. For the first time, he addressed the discovery not as a political leader, but as a man moved by the weight of truth. "We do not erase our history. We uncover it. And in doing so, we find something more than stone. We find the soul." By now, the Leshan Buddha was no longer a tourist site. It was a sacred mountain. Not because of conversion. Not because of conquest. But because, for the first time in centuries, the world was listening to the whisper of the prophets hidden in stone. The final revelation, the scroll hidden beneath the altar inside the Leshan Buddha, sent waves across the world that no government, religious institution, or skeptic could contain. The message was clear, pure, and beyond political manipulation. It wasn't written to convert, to divide, or to dominate. It was a testimony, a 1,000-year-old whisper that had waited silently within stone until the world was ready to listen. "We testify that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. We built this not to conquer, but to remember. For Zulkifli walked in patience here, and we honor him with stone and silence. If you find this, know that we came in peace." Those final words, "We came in peace," became a global slogan for interfaith harmony. They were printed on shirts, engraved on commemorative plaques, and projected onto buildings from Istanbul to Jakarta. But more than that, they ignited an awakening, not just among Muslims, but among seekers of truth in every corner of the globe. In Leshan, the site was officially renamed by the Chinese government as the Valley of Unity, a gesture approved by President Xi Jinping after intense deliberation. He gave a speech beneath the towering figure of the Buddha, not as a commander, but as a guardian of heritage. "We do not ask you to believe what you do not. We ask you to witness what has been revealed. This land has always welcomed travelers. Today, it welcomes the past." The Chinese Communist Party, known for suppressing religion, had now become the unlikely custodian of the greatest spiritual discovery in modern history. And they were careful in how they managed it. A new protocol was issued. The site would remain open to all faiths. No group could claim it exclusively. The chamber would be accessible only through guided tours under international supervision. What had begun as a political risk had turned into a diplomatic masterpiece. China was now seen as a leader in spiritual diplomacy. In the Muslim world, the response was nothing short of overwhelming. Millions began researching the life of Prophet Zulkifli. In mosques from Nigeria to New York, entire khutbah series were dedicated to his example. Children were named Zulkifli in record numbers. Books were published, documentaries streamed, and scholars gathered to re-examine everything they knew about Islam's Eastern journey. But the most beautiful transformation happened in the hearts of the ordinary. In Tokyo, a Buddhist woman visited a mosque for the first time. She told the imam, "I do not know your prayers yet. But I believe your prophet Zulkifli prayed like I do, quietly, with his heart." In Morocco, a Christian professor gave a lecture titled, The Buddha who remembered the one God. And in rural Pakistan, an old man sat with his grandson beneath a tree and said, "The world looked east for silk and spices. But Allah sent them something more valuable, a prophet's shadow carved in stone." Meanwhile, in China, thousands quietly embraced Islam. They did not make noise. There were no rallies, no grand announcements. Just quiet shahadas whispered in homes, on mountain trails, and in university dorms. One such person was Zhang Wei, the young poet whose verses had earlier gone viral. She accepted Islam after visiting the Leshan site with her parents. Her father, a lifelong agnostic, stood beside her and said, "If stone can carry truth for 1,000 years, so can the heart of my daughter." Zhang Wei wrote a final poem that later appeared on a memorial plaque inside the Leshan chamber. They did not preach. They carved. Not on skin or scroll, but on mountain and time. And when we listened, the stone did not scream. It sighed. And the world changed. Internationally, countries began collaborating on new research. Saudi Arabia and China co-funded an institute for historical religious pathways. Malaysia introduced the Zulkifli Fellowship, a scholarship for interfaith scholars. Turkey announced plans to build a replica chamber for global visitors who could not travel to China. Even Pope Francis issued a statement from the Vatican. "We are all travelers on the same road, pausing at different mile markers. If a stone in China bears the name of a prophet we share, then we must stop and listen. Not to agree, but to understand." Yet amid celebration, there were still those who resisted. In some regions, radical groups claimed the discovery was a threat to their doctrines. In others, political figures feared a religious revival would destabilize secular ideologies. But their voices were drowned in a chorus of scholars, artists, monks, priests, rabbis, and imams who spoke with one voice. This is not the time for fear. It is the time for truth. And in the spiritual realm, something deeper happened. People began to pray differently. Some Muslims, standing in Salah, imagined the chamber beneath the Buddha, with its ancient carvings glowing silently. Buddhists lit candles with the name Zulkifli written beside them. Jews studied Ezekiel with renewed awe, wondering if their prophet had traveled farther than history had ever told. Christians began to speak of lost prophets, whose light had never truly been extinguished. It was as if the Leshan statue had cracked open not just stone, but the vault of human memory. President Xi, reflecting on the legacy of this moment, authorized the construction of a global peace library near the site, where texts from every major faith and philosophy would be preserved together, without hierarchy. On its entrance, carved into white jade, would be the scroll's last line. "If you find this, know that we came in peace." And so, the final part of the story came not in words, but in silence. In the valley of Leshan, as the wind rustled through the trees and the sound of the river echoed between stone cliffs, the statue watched. Not with eyes of judgment, but with the serenity of one who had always known the truth, and had waited patiently for humanity to be ready. And at last we were